Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to streamline an existing Power Automate cloud flow. This flow sends an email to various stakeholders when a record in Salesforce is modified. But the issue with this flow is that there are 3 send email actions that we have to manage when we really should only need to manage 1 email template. The reason there are 3 is because this flow has some conditions that you see here, where depending on the Salesforce data, the email needs to have different recipients. Our goal is to make this flow easily maintained, but if 1 email template needs to be modified, we have to do the same modification across all 3 emails. Let's update this flow together so that the flow still does what it needs to do, but we only have to work with 1 send email action instead of 3. We're going to essentially be creating variables. We're still going to keep our conditions, but the conditions, instead of sending an email, they're going to be conditions for creating variables that will store the email addresses of the necessary people. And then when one condition is met, those emails are stored. The other conditions are not met, so the emails don't get stored. And then finally, the send email action, instead of being within each of these conditions, will actually exist down here below the condition and will run after the conditions are cycled through. And then the conditions that actually were satisfied stored the emails that we want, and then we can use those as dynamic content in the to lines and in the CCC lines as well. And it will only send the email to the persons who are met in those conditions. So let's get started. I am going to go ahead and just start by moving the email out of here, and we're going to put it down here. This apply to each has an append to string variable, and we need to move that out of here and up into here so that this gets appended for this email distro prior to these conditions running. So we're just going to drag this right up here, and we have that there. And we just check and make sure that that looks good. And what that's doing is creating an email distribution list, which I covered in a different video. You can check that out. I'll put that in the description below. Now, the next thing here is we want this get records of these users. We also want that to exist up above as well. So, because that's pulling from, this action is pulling from this action here. So I'm going to put this right here. And then this is getting some data from Salesforce. So it's getting particular data for account owners and CSM. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually indicate that here. Owner, CSM, just so that I know what I'm working with there. Okay, now we have nothing in our true for our first condition. We don't need to make any adjustments to our conditions. We just need to create a compose action. And this compose action, the input here is going to be an email address. And for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to put in my own email address. But this email address is actually going to store email address of an instructor for this particular region related to this condition. So you can see the condition is the account region is North America. So for this, I'm just going to make a note that this particular compose is composing the email address for the North America instructor, because I'm going to be creating a few more compose actions. So that's all that we need to have in this first one here. So our next condition, we're going to add another compose action. we actually need two compose actions for this next condition. Because for this condition, if the account region is APAC, we're sending it to the APAC instructor, but we're also sending it to someone else in the APAC region. So I'm going to just go ahead and delete these because these are redundant. I don't need these because I moved them outside of these conditions. So I'm deleting these. I'm deleting the email. And I'm deleting this apply to each. Right, now we can go ahead and insert our compose action. And the first compose action is going to be another email. Now again, this is what I'm doing for testing. I'm putting my own email in here. Of course, when it's in production, it will have the actual instructor email in here. But for the sake of this tutorial, and of course protecting email information, I'm just going to use my own email. And then I need to do for this one more compose action. So essentially I'm setting this up as a placeholder for when I finally put this into production, and I'll go back in and put the right email addresses into here. And once again, just putting my own email in here. Okay, now we just have one more to do. This is the MEA region. So once again, we're going to delete all of these that are inside of here. Now we have something interesting for this one because our compose action is actually multiple people or multiple values within one compose. So we just go ahead and we separate those by a semicolon. So in this case, we have two email addresses, but we're just going to separate them by a semicolon. And it's going to look like that. No space in there, and then we'll rename this compose so everything is clear. It's good. Now the next thing we'll do is we'll modify this email here, this send an email action. And this is going to be, we'll rename this now because it's going to be all regions, just our one email template that we need to deal with. And then down here in our, well, in our to line, actually, this is going to be dynamic content from some Salesforce data up above and some actions that we have. So just to start for testing, once again, just putting my email in here because I want to receive that email and make sure that the right recipients were pulled into here down below. And then of course we can see by the run history that everything worked correctly as well. So I'm going to now just add in all of my compose outputs in the CC. So we can click on the dynamic content, and then we're going to put in the outputs of the compose there, separated by a semicolon. And then the next one is this one, separated again. And the next one is this one, separated one more time. Here we go, and the last one. So now we have all of those. Now for testing purposes, I'm actually gonna put the dynamic content in here. So I'm gonna delete this. And what I'm gonna do is indicate like I'm going to test all of these things just to make sure that dynamic content is pulling correctly based on the conditions. So we'll start by putting in our email distro, make sure that that works. So we do that, and then I'm going to make sure that each one of these will work. So we have that one, we have this one, we have this one, and then we have this one. And then we just add the outputs after each one of these tags. And this will just let us verify that these will pull in the right details. That looks good. Now, before we test, have all of our composed actions added. I'm going to change this trigger. This is the last thing I'm going to do because I want to just trigger this manually. I don't want to actually have to go in and modify anything. So I'm actually going to delete this. And we're going to just add in a manual trigger. So add a trigger. I've never actually tried this manually trigger in the new designer. So I wasn't sure what to search for there. But there we have it. So now because we deleted our trigger, of course, it messed up our dynamic content that was in these actions down here from our trigger. So it's not going to be, this record ID is pulled from the previous trigger. So what we're going to do is we're just going to test it with a random account from Salesforce because we don't need to, we're just sending this out to ourselves for testing. So we're going to remove this record ID tag. And then I'm going to go over into the Salesforce and grab a random record ID. So here's our record ID. Now I want to check these because these might have gotten messed up as well. And honestly, we don't even need all of these for testing. So I think what I'll do is just delete some of these. We need the record, but then we should have everything else. We leave in the account owner user. I'm going to delete this one. Any of these that were pulled from the trigger that we deleted, we don't want to have in here or our flow will fail. So I think I got that all looking correct. I can leave these compose in there. Those aren't gonna do anything. So this is looking good. And then I think what I'll do here is we also have these ones down here. We don't need these to run either. We just need it to send the email. So in here, I'll put in a terminate action. I could just delete all of those, but I'll just put in a terminate action instead. So the status is succeeded. And that should be good. So now I'm going to save. And one error that came up, and this one is get records task contains okay. So you know what? We've got some stuff down here and it's not going to work. So you know what? This is for testing. I copied this flow over from the original flow. So deleting these, not gonna harm anything at all. So I'm just going to delete these, delete this one. Okay, let's save this again. Let's see if any more errors get tossed at us. It's good. So I'm gonna go back out here and I'm gonna turn it on. And then I'm just gonna click run from up here. And run. And we gotta run fail from one of these compose actions. Let's see if we can just remove those. So let's go back in and we'll edit. And let's see, I'm gonna remove both of these. And then another thing that I just need to check is I don't want to CC these because we're testing. So I'm going to clear all of those out because we're testing and we're just pulling in the details into the email body. So I'm clearing all of this out too. Okay, that looks good. And then we've got some dynamic content in here. We're going to get rid of that. And just going to put in here test. All right, that looks good. So I think we should be good to go. Let's save again and we'll test it. And since we're inside here, after it saves, I'm just going to test from the side here, manual test. And we have a successful run. So I'm going to go over to my email. And here's the email that resulted. So it did pull in, so that met the condition from this mimetic condition, and it pulled in the dynamic dynamic content from that compose action within that condition. So if we go back to our flow and we check this, we can see, so this first condition was not met. And then the second one was also not met, and the third one was met, and that's the I meta one. And so it created our variable and stored it there, and then it populated it in our email body. And our email distro also collected the right email address and populated it into the email body. So this looks like it's working great. What we can do is we'll run 2 more tests. We'll grab an account where we know the region is North America, and we'll grab one where we know the region is APAC and satisfies the conditions in here. And then we'll see what the resulting email shows us. And then once we know that everything's working, then we can, of course, update our original flow and put those emails into the to and the CC lines and start that and get that up and running. So this was kind of a fun little flow update that will make it easier for us to maintain by only having one email address in there. So this is the example of how we can use conditions to generate certain values that we need to store for future use in our flow. I hope that you found this useful. I had a lot of fun putting this together, and I hope you did too. And I will see you in the next video. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.